Hello and welcome to day 34 of our 1000 days of no code challenge. In the previous video, I have asked you to group them as column, group them as rows, and so on and so forth. And I also told you to not worry about it. We are going to cover in the next sessions. And today, it's time for us to understand what is grouping by column. If you have used Google Sheets or Excel file, then we have the concept of columns and rows. Column means you are stacking elements one below the other, whereas row means you are stacking them one besides the other. Okay, in today's video, let's understand how grouping by column works in Bubble. So without further ado, let's get started. So by default, the grouping will be in fixed layout. But let's see what happens when we group them as columns. So I'm selecting this elements, and firstly I'll group them as a fixed container. When I do that, you can see the buttons stayed wherever they were, but a group was added combining all of them together. Okay, you can see we have group A here, and when you expand you can see all the buttons added within that. Now I'll go to the group element layout, which is fixed, and change this to column. You can quickly see that buttons came one below the other. Okay, that is, all the buttons have been added in one column. Now to understand this better, I'll just drop this text boxes over here, and the parent element, that is the page, is in fixed, so I'll change that also to column. You could quickly see that when I changed from fixed to column, let me undo this. These buttons were here, okay, the group was here, and these text elements that we had added were here. As soon as I change the container layout from fixed to column, all the elements were stacked one below the other, starting from left top. So let's understand. Now this is a group that we created, and let's call this as column. Okay, let me put this elements in group column container as well, and then I'll just hide this for now. This element is visible on page load. I'll uncheck this. I'll click on collapse when hidden. Okay, and I'll go to this particular group and hide this. Let's go to this particular group and see how we can play around with this. Okay, now there is something called container layout. Container layout is column. Okay, here container means this particular group. We have container alignment, where it says it is right now top aligned. Okay, if I click on center or bottom or any of this, nothing is changing. Why is this? So let's see. Firstly, to understand that, I'll go to minimum height, okay, and change this to 700. As soon as I do that, you can see the height of this particular container has increased. And once that is done, I'll go back to container alignment, and this is top aligned. I'll click on center align, and all the buttons stacked one below the other comes at the center of the entire container. Okay, so you can see the top portion and the bottom portion is equally divided. If I select bottom aligned, all the elements will come to the bottom. Now there are two more options available. Let's see what are those. This is called space around. So when I select this, there will be space at the top, in between, and also at the bottom. And the way it is structured is the top portion and the bottom portion put together is equal to each of the spaces in between. Okay, and that is what is called space around. If you don't want the space at the bottom and the top over here, you can select the last one, which is space between. Okay, this will add spaces only in between the elements and not at the top or bottom. Now I'll select top aligned And then let's go to apply gap spacing between elements, right? This is applicable only for the first three options. Okay, so let's understand what is this. I'll select this. It is asking you what should be the row gap. Let's see what is this. Let me add it as 2. You can see there is a 2 pixels gap added between each of these elements. Let me make this as 5. Some more space increase. Let me make it as 10. Some more, right? 20. Now we have good 20 pixel gaps in between the buttons, right? This is applicable for top aligned, center aligned, and bottom aligned. Okay, but if we go to space around or space between, this will not be applicable. Now let's understand a couple of more properties here. This element is visible on page load. If this is checked, then this particular container, because we are talking about group column right now, okay, this particular group will be displayed on the front end when the page loads. Okay, let's go to group B, where this element is visible on page load is unchecked. So when we preview this, we can see that this buttons is visible because this particular group we had mentioned visible on page load. The other group that we had added was not visible on page load, and hence it was not shown when the page loaded. Now let's try to understand what is this collapse when hidden. So to understand that, I'll firstly reduce this to 500. Okay, and this group, I'll remove the collapse when hidden for now. I'll add a button below this. Okay, you will understand why. I'll add a background color to this particular group. Okay, and we have this button. Let's preview this. Now you can see this particular group is here and this button is here, and the center portion, it is not displaying us, but it is consuming the space, right? But when I go to group B and layout and select this collapse when hidden, okay, what it basically does is it will not consume the space it is meant to consume, okay, if it is hidden. So let's come back to this particular page, refresh it, and see what happens. Now this particular button and this group are sticking to each other because the group in between, which is group B, is now hidden, and we have selected collapse when hidden. So it is not taking up that space. I hope grouping with column is clear now. Please practice. And now you know how grouping with column works. Take some time to experiment with all the parameters that we have covered today so that you understand that better. And that's all for today. Tomorrow we are going to cover how grouping with rows function. Thank you. See you in the next one.